So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, taking some time out of your day. My name is June Arcilla. I work with Chessie at the Environmental Justice and Equity Branch. As she mentioned, I am the DBE Program Manager. Probably more relevant to you all here today, since Karen's retirement, I've sort of taken over her responsibilities pertaining to professional services scoring with the civil rights 10-point allotment. And so today, the focus of this presentation, I think, was really to address the new scoring rubric for civil rights as it pertains to professional services contracts. It was brought to our attention that I think there was a desire from the consultant community to be able to talk about and discuss the new scoring rubric and hopefully get any questions answered by excuse me, by CDOT staff. And so I'm hoping that this could be a good forum for that. I know Chessie mentioned that there's a Q&A at the end, but I also was hoping that this could be an interactive session as well, Chessie. I hope that doesn't break protocol. So I'm actually happy
That
to
sounds
answer
great,
any.
June.
Yeah, I'm actually happy to answer any questions as I'm doing the presentation. So please feel free to interrupt me, answer any questions you all may have. I want this to be useful for everybody on the call. And so thank you so much for your input and any questions you might have. So we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. But before I kind of go into the professional services scoring for civil rights, wanted to talk a little bit, do a little plug for an initiative from our office at the Environmental Justice and Equity Branch called Equity 360. Really here, this is an initiative by our department to really try and instill equity in all aspects of what CDOT does. And so wanted to put that into context because I think a lot of the changes related to the scoring rubric, what we're looking for when we're grading and evaluating the scoring, is really going towards small business participation, inclusion of small businesses in our contracting. And so wanted to just kind of tie that into this initiative that our office oversees. As I mentioned earlier, this presentation is meant to really go over the new scoring rubric that was implemented in July of last year, kind of go over evaluating proposals on from a civil rights standpoint, try to go over some frequently asked questions and some of the different categories that we score in, and then hopefully I can provide some best practices, some common issues, mistakes that I've seen in scoring proposals. And then, as I mentioned, I really welcome you all on this call today to ask any questions, provide any feedback from your own perspective as you all submit proposals and see how we evaluate them and score them. So just a quick overview again of the current scoring rubric. It was implemented in July of 2023. We have 10 points that's allocated for civil rights considerations. Some of the big changes that occurred from the prior scoring rubric is that we've allocated 2 points now for the use of ESB firms, and then we removed points that were previously allocated for variety of subconsultants and vendors who all you've included as a part of your team. There's also 2 points now for the utilization of mentor-protege program participants. The prior version, the current version also removed the allocation of 1 point for any new teaming partners. So that's a change as well under the current rubric. And then the new rubric allows for proposers that have not been awarded CDOT contracts in the past 5 years to get 4 points, even if they don't have DBE or ESB certification. So that's a change as well from the old rubric. Here is the current rubric that we have. Don't worry, we're going to kind of go over them in more detail. This is more of just a bird's eye view so you guys can kind of see what we're looking at, what we're evaluating every time a proposal is in front of us, what are the standards we have to abide by. And so we're looking at each of these today in the presentation. So the first category pertains to small business participation and contingency plan. So that currently is allocated 1 point, a maximum of 1 point. You can see from the rubric, in order to get the full point, you must have an outlined specific approach to subcontracting, including a plan for unbundling work to establish opportunities for DBEs and ESBs, as well as identification of work areas that DBE and ESB firms will be utilized during the project. This will include a detailed contingency plan if the planned approach or team changes or does not meet the DBE goal. For this particular category, what we're really looking for is for the proposer to have a very strategic plan as to how they're going to integrate small business into the contract and as a part of their team. And so when we're talking about outlining a specific approach to subcontracting, we want to be able to see that you looked at the scope as a whole, you took into consideration all the different areas of work, and you've really planned out what you really identify what are good opportunities for subcontracting for small businesses. And of course, we want to make sure as well, like we'll see it in your plan, who you plan, what small businesses you're planning to include as a part of your team, what work they're going to be doing on the contract. And then you can see that we'll deduct points if the contingency plan, and then the contingency plan, I'm sorry. So the contingency plan is also really important because what we want to see there is, so obviously you have a plan at the beginning of the contract, but circumstances may change, may warrant you to pivot. If you've been awarded the contract, and what we want to see is that you've thought about strategically how you're going to pivot if in fact the circumstances change, and so that you have a plan in place to be able to replace any DBEs maybe that are no longer able to participate on the contract moving forward, or maybe the scope of the work changes or how the work is going to be approached on the contract. We want to know that, we want to see that you've strategically thought about this ahead of time and that you have a plan in place. So some frequently asked questions that we get pertaining to this category. What happens if there isn't a DBE goal, right? Do I still need to have a small business participation plan and a contingency plan? And the answer to that is yes. As I mentioned, with this category, we are just looking for how you're looking to integrate small business into your team, into the contract. And so even if there isn't a DBE goal, we still like to see the proposer strategically thinking about what are some areas where, yeah, I may need subcontracting and I'm going to try to incorporate small businesses in those areas. When it comes to the contingency plan, we still want to be able to see that even if there isn't a DBE goal, but you had an initial sort of plan to integrate small business into the contract, and then for whatever reason, those small businesses that you originally were counting on to integrate into the contract are no longer able to participate, we still want to be able to see that you are thinking about ways to kind of replace those that lost small business participation in the event that it does happen. So we're still, even without a DBE goal, we're still looking for you to have a small business participation plan. How do you plan to integrate small business into the contract? And then if those small businesses that you originally were looking to involve in the contract are no longer able to participate, what's your backup plan? Do you plan on replacing them with potentially other small businesses that could also contribute to the contract? As I mentioned, kind of the best practices, some of the things that I just highly encourage is you being able to demonstrate with kind of specificity how you plan to utilize small business on the contract. What we like to see is if you're able to identify specific areas of subcontracting that you have identified for small business participation. And then also some other things that we've seen as well is if you know for a fact that there are certain firms maybe that do multiple types of work, or they're very versatile and can do multiple types of work on the contract, perhaps you can use those firms that are already part of the team as contingencies as well, saying, if X firm can't participate or do this work that we originally planned for them to do, I have this other team, small business that's already part of my team that can take over and do that work in their place or in their stead. In terms of some things that I've seen that will cause some deductions in points, particularly as it relates to contingency plans or contingency plans with very like minimal detail. So what I've seen in some proposals is people will say, well, we have contingencies in place if they're needed, um, or we have a network of small businesses that we work with frequently, so we'll just call one of them, um, if the need arises, right? That's very vague, doesn't have a lot of specificity, and so for that, sometimes those proposals will get docked just because there's minimal detail there as kind of discussed in the rubric itself. So in this particular category, what I'd suggest and kind of what I tell people is just to provide as much specificity as you can. What are the areas for subcontracting that you've really kind of looked at and considered, and identified for small business participation? And then when it comes to the contingency plans, make sure that you're specifying what are those areas of work that you see as potential contingencies, or specific firms, if you already have specific firms in mind, that you plan on using or contacting in the event that the need arises. Chelsea, I think I see somebody's hand up. Nick?
You're good. I was just going to say that. Yes, Nick, are you able to unmute and
Yes,
ask
I
your
am.
question?
Can you hear me
Perfect.
okay? Perfect.
Yes, we
Hey,
can.
so quick question on the contingency plan side of things. Let's say we want to specify potential SBE, ESB, or DBE subs to backfill a specific role as a part of the contingency. Is it then required that those people are showcased in our proposal as, part of our org chart and part of our team with a bio, that type of thing? Or is it acceptable then from that front, knowing that it's a contingency firm, that we could subcontract with them later downstream if need be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't want to speak out of turn. I know part of this will also kind of overlap. Some of these questions will overlap with some of the requirements with engineering contracts and kind of what they'd like to see. Because obviously, as I mentioned, we only have kind of a small portion of the scoring, right? We only have sort of that 10 point piece. So I don't know if Paley or anybody on her team are on the call that could answer that question, if they need to be showcased. From a civil rights standpoint, as I mentioned, you don't necessarily need to showcase them in terms of like touting their credentials or what their expertise is or anything like that. I think probably where I've seen what most people do when I was talking about identifying specific firms, what I've seen people do in proposals typically is they'll say, I have a pretty versatile uh, team of firms that are already on my proposal, and so if this firm that's already included as a part of my team can't perform, I have firm B that's already in my proposal or my part of my team as well that can also do the work, and so they could serve as a contingency if the work area isn't going to change. And then what I've also seen is if they're looking at specific work areas, if circumstances change and they don't necessarily want to identify or know the specific firms they want to replace, what I've seen people do is they'll say, but we do know, this scope of work has this area available. We've identified it as ripe for subcontracting opportunity because we know there's a lot of DBEs or ESBs that work in this space. And so we'll probably consider these work areas as subcontracting opportunities, if in the event that we need to kind of, supplement or change our kind of small business approach. I hope that answers your question. I know you were kind of asking about the showcasing of the firm specifically, but I know that kind of overlaps, like I said, with the proposal requirements at large. And so I don't want to speak out of turn, just kind of talking from a civil rights standpoint. I hope that was helpful.
Do
Hey,
you
hey,
score
June.
it just, oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Paley.
Paley,
I
there you are.
apologize.
Oh, yeah. So I would say this is a question that we've been kind of contemplating on our side as well. We usually refer to contingency planning as succession planning. And we do have a section in most RFPs that speaks to it. And we're hoping to clarify specifically what they're looking for. So as opposed to just propose your succession planning, if the project manager wants a more detailed explanation, we're looking to outline that in the RFP so you guys aren't guessing. So we're more saying, for the succession plan, name specific people if that's a priority for the project manager, or just detailing, provide a very general explanation of how you would fill gaps. So we're hoping to clarify that in the next few months in the RFP instructions as well.
Nick, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think, and one maybe point of clarification that might help is when you score these sections, like when you compartmentalize and you score these two sections, so you score the proposal side and then you score the small business side. Does your group score the small business side and then give the scores to Pele, or does like Pele's team score the entirety of the proposal and reconcile the small business components against your criteria in the rubric and then add those in total? The reason why I ask is that if you score them separately or compartmentalize that scoring and Pele scores the other side, then what you kind of dictate or determine is like the best practice for these points can stand isolated from the other one. So then, yes, like contingency could be other firms that don't need to be included. It's just up to you then at that point. So I guess that was another maybe question 2 element.
Yeah, so I score them in isolation. So I'm limited to kind of the 10-point window and kind of the considerations that we have laid out in our rubric. I will say, like I said, for us, in terms of civil rights considerations and getting the maximum point here for this category, we're not necessarily requiring that you name the specific firms or showcase the specific firms that you have in mind as contingencies. What we really want to see again is just sort of strategic thinking in terms of what are the areas that you think are going to be good for subcontracting opportunity. Here's what we've identified as subcontracting opportunity in the event that we need more small business participation. What we want people to kind of steer clear of is what we've seen where they generally just reference, well, we have a contingency in mind. We have a directory of firms and network of firms that we're going to contact if needed, but then they don't give us any more detail about that, right? Those are just sort of very vague kind of statements. And so that's what we want people to kind of steer away from. We want you to provide more specifics about what your contingencies are. And that can stop short of naming specific firms and having to highlight them and possibly contradicting whatever requirements there might be with the rest of the proposal, if that makes sense. Any other questions on this particular category? Okay, so I'll move on. I don't think there are any more questions, but like I said, feel free to interrupt me. Happy to go back if we need to later on. So the second category, this one is pretty self-explanatory, so I don't get a lot of questions in this category, but it just pertains to ESB subconsultants and vendor utilization. So in order to get kind of the maximum 2 points, you have to have a level 1 ESB. As a reminder to folks that may not be familiar with the ESB program, we have 3 levels of ESB firms. Level 1 are kind of your smallest of the small ESBs. Level 2 ESBs are kind of your middle-sized ESBs, and then the SBE level firms are the firms that are really big and kind of on the verge of graduating out of the program based on business size. So in order to get the maximum 2 points, having a level 1 ESB as a part of your team. We also ask that folks kind of identify the work areas where the ESBs how the ESBs are going to be utilized on the contract. This is just something, again, we like to see just goes again to that sort of strategic thinking about how to utilize small business on your contracts and have them integrated into the project as a whole. You get 1 point if you have a level 2 or an SBE level ESB included as a part of your team, and then not having any ESBs as a part of your team would result in 0 points. So not a lot of questions there. It seems pretty self-explanatory, but I don't know. I'm going to pause just for a sec if folks on the call have any questions regarding that. Okay. So moving on to the next category, participant from CDOT Mentor Protege Program, maximum of 2 points. And so in order to get the maximum 2 points for this category, the proposer has to be an active or 1-year graduate mentor of the Small Business Mentor Protege Program, and then uses an ESB protege that's currently ESB certified as a part of their team. The 1 point is if you're using any protege that's currently part of the CDOT Mentor Protege Program, but you're not currently, as the proposer, a prime, an active or one-year graduate mentor of the program. And then if you don't include any participants of the CDOT Mentor Protege Program as a part of your team, then that would result in 0 points in this category. Some frequently asked questions here. So if my firm is currently a mentor or a one-year graduate mentor of the program, does the protege have to be my protege in order to get the 2 points? And the answer to that is no. You can use any protege that is currently or has participated in the program in the past, and you could still get the 2 points. The next question is, what if a firm was a participant as a protege prior to 2018? Just so that you guys all know, so we do have a record of all the participants of the Mentor Protege program dating back to 2018. It was brought to our attention, though, that there are some firms that participated in the program prior to 2018. And so what we've been telling people is that you can, as long as you're able to provide documentation showing that you were a participant in the program, then we'll go ahead and give you credit for that as well. And again, that just goes to proteges, because the mentor requirement currently under the rubric, you have to be either an active or one-year graduate mentor. So that's moot for any mentors that participated prior to 2018. And then another question I've received under this category is, what if the proposing firm is a protege, but not a mentor? So currently under the current rubric, unfortunately, you don't get the full maximum 4 points for that. And so that's something that we may look into in the future in terms of potentially modifying that. But under the current rubric, you do not get the 4 points if you as the proposing firm are a protege and not a mentor.
And June, I just wanted to chime in real quick. This is
Yes.
Chessie, and I saw Jason. Thank you for your comment on there. And that June said this is something we're constantly evaluating. I know we've changed our mentor protege points a few times here, and some of the process behind this is we've been able to build in additional points and benefits for being a protege, and then it kind of felt a little bit empty on the mentor side. So that's kind of what the thinking was behind this, helping those mentors with that a little bit additional point. Jason, I definitely see what you're saying, and like we've been saying, we're constantly evaluating this. So that's what we're trying right now, and some of the thought process behind it. But we can definitely discuss more. Doesn't mean it's forever, but something we're trying out.
Danny, I think you had a hand up.
Yeah, just to clarify, so if you're a protege and you're proposing as a prime, how many points are you eligible for in this category?
Yeah, so right now, in order to get kind of the full 2 points, you as the proposer essentially have to be an active or one-year graduate mentor. And so if you as the proposer are just a protege right now, then you would get the 1 point under this current rubric.
Okay, and that's would you have to have a protege as a sub also, or just being the prime?
You can use yourself as part of the protege, right, to satisfy kind of that requirement of having a protege as part of the team.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, perfect. We'll move on to the next category.
I did have a question. This is Laura.
Hi, Laura.
What is a one-year graduate mentor? You mentioned that, but the program's 2 years long. I'm just wondering what it means.
Yeah, I think the idea there is that you would have graduated no more than the year, I guess the cohort that left the year before. So if it's every 2 years, right, Chessie, then you are like, for example, I think we had a group from 2022, but since their engagement in the program really didn't end, to my understanding, until 2023, then even though they're part of that 2022 group, right, they're still technically considered kind of like the 1-year graduates. Is that
Yeah,
right,
so
Chessie?
we go off of the program completion date. So you have to remain in good standing, the things that are kind of outlined in the guidance. So as long as you've met all of those, we go off of the completion date. So yeah, in the example of, let's say we had someone start in 2021, but they graduated 2023. So that would be considered their graduation date, is the end of the program.
So category 4, small business contract compliance oversight, maximum of 1 point. So here you get the full point if you have someone that you've identified as sort of the main contract compliance person, contact person for your organization as the proposer, and then you outline a specific process for monitoring civil rights compliance on the contract. That's how you get the full maximum points. You get half a point if you identify a compliance person or you identify a civil rights compliance process with minimal detail. And then you get 0 points if you don't have kind of a point of contact or you don't outline a process responsible for kind of the civil rights compliance oversight. So with this particular category, some frequently asked questions we get, do I have to have a compliance oversight process if there's no DVE goal, right? Civil rights requirements goes beyond just satisfying a DVE goal and kind of tracking DVE participation relative to that goal, right? From civil rights standpoint, we also have prompt payment requirements. We also have requirements that if a DBE, whether they're committed or not, is participating on the contract, we want to make sure that you're performing commercially useful function reviews on those firms. Want to make sure payments are being entered and reported and confirmed in B2G. And so these compliance oversight processes that we're talking about just extend beyond tracking DBE participation. So yes, you have to have kind of this compliance oversight process available, even if there isn't a DBE goal per se on the contract. And then how much detail should be included in the process? I think this really kind of is a good segue to some of the best practices that we've included here on this particular slide. So what we like to see is that you are very specific about how you want to ensure that you're going to be meeting all of the civil rights compliance requirements on your given contract. And what we sometimes see on these proposals is that we have folks who maybe they'll tout the credentials of the civil rights point of contact, and they'll say, oh, we have this person, they've taken all the CDOT trainings, they're up to date on all of the trainings that CDOT has put out, they've been doing this for 15 years, et cetera, which is fantastic and it's great. But then they just leave it at that and they don't really articulate, well, what is the actual process to ensure that you're going to be in compliance with all of the different civil rights requirements. Some of the things that I've seen that have been really good is people kind of detailing, like, in addition to making sure that, all the payments are entered into B2G, monitoring the systems, et cetera, we meet on a, whatever, quarterly basis. We have a team meeting, or I meet, the project manager meets with the civil rights person whatever regular intervals they've set to kind of go over, make sure, document everything, looking at the DBE participation, seeing how that they're meeting the goal, making sure that prompt payment is being followed, making sure payments are being entered into B2G. So that's really kind of what we're looking to do or looking for when we're looking at this category. We want to make sure that there's specificity. There isn't like a perfect oversight process, but we just want to make sure that you have a process in place to do a little bit of quality assurance quality control, making sure that everything is being done properly. Kind of that first bullet, do not just rely on the B2G reporting requirements. So we all know, right, that we require you all to enter payments into B2G. You're as part of our civil rights, kind of check the box. But a lot of times people sort of defer to that requirement as kind of their compliance oversight process, that, oh, well, everything's in B2G, so we're just going to check that. And sometimes we all know that that may not necessarily be, the best practice, because what if payments are not being reported, or they're subs that are not being entered into B2G, that sort of thing. And so again, just generally speaking, there isn't like a magical process here, but we just want to make sure that you as a proposer have a very thoughtful, very intentional quality assurance process as it relates to civil rights compliance. That's really what we're looking for when we're talking about having a specific kind of detailed compliance oversight process. And again, as I mentioned, making sure that you have very competent, very experienced people as the point of contact is great. It's fantastic, but that is not in of itself a process that we can fully evaluate. And so just kind of based on the rubric, that's not something that I can really give credit for in terms of having a detailed process if all you've outlined is sort of the credentials of your civil rights point of contact. So that's something that I've seen quite a bit with the proposals that I've scored thus far. I don't know if there are any questions regarding this category. No
I'm not seeing any come in the
Okay.
chat regarding this.
Perfect. Okay. So then the last category, certification status and new prime opportunities. So this is a maximum of 4 points. And so this one is fairly self-explanatory. You get the 4 points if you as the proposer have a DBE and ESB certification, or if you as the proposer have, if you have one of the DBE or ESB certifications, and then you're bidding essentially as a new contractor with CDOT who has not been awarded a CDOT contract in the last 5 years. The third way that you can get the full maximum 4 points, and again, as I mentioned earlier in one of the slides, this is a new change to the rubric from the last iteration, that if you are a new proposer that has not been awarded a contract in the last 5 years, even without a DBE or ESB certification, then you are able to get that maximum 4 points under this particular category. If you as a proposer are DBE or ESB certified, you can get 2 points, even if you've been awarded a contract in the last 5 years. And then no DBE or ESB certification for the proposer, and you're not a new potential contractor with CDOT, then that results in 0 points under the current rubric. Yeah, can my firm get the maximum 4 points without being DBE or ESB certified? Yes, under that recent change that was implemented in July of last year. Any questions with this particular category? Okay. So we kind of have some resources available for you guys. I think that covers all of the different categories under the current rubric that we're looking at when we evaluate proposals. You have some resources that are available for you here if you have any questions regarding kind of the different small business civil rights requirements on professional services contracts. Oh, Megan, I think I see a hand up.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. My question was more about the form itself. And I was going to ask, I know that in the past there was the requirement for the new DBE/ESB teaming partner, and that column is still on the form. So I wasn't 100% sure like what question we're really answering by checking that, and then like if that's being scored.
Is that on the anticipated participation plan form?
Yes, so we have to submit with the narrative.
Because I'll take a look at that. That may just need to be updated. Yeah, because as I mentioned, that new teaming partner, that was being evaluated under the previous iteration of the scoring rubric, but now it's no longer being scored at this point. And so that may be something that we need to tweak and remove from our existing forms, just to make sure if that's creating, if that's a point of confusion for folks.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So yeah, we have these. Oh, sorry.
We actually just got another one.
Oh, yeah. Perfect.
So it says, if we're a new prime, is there anything specific we need to mention?
Anything specific you have to mention in your proposal? I imagine in your proposal. I mean, really, if you can identify, we have a way of double checking our records just to assess whether somebody is in fact a new prime. But certainly, you know, spelling that out in your proposal is very helpful for the reviewer. But we'll still double check that with our records just to verify that there haven't been any contracts that have been awarded to that proposer in the last 5 years.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I don't think there's any other questions. I had a question slide up, but that's it for a second in case there are other folks on the call that may have some questions. If not, this is my contact information. As I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, I know many of you have dealt with Karen Fuji-Martin as it pertains to your professional services questions. And then, you know, obviously with her retirement, you know, which we're all very sad about, that a lot of the questions can now go to me. And so please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions, concerns, things like that. As Chessie mentioned, you know, with these things, we're constantly evaluating them. Any feedback we get from you all is great because, you know, not saying that we're going to change the rubric in the near future, but certainly as we continuously evaluate our programs, the things that we do, we certainly value your feedback and want to make sure we're taking those into consideration in the event that we do at some point in the future decide we'd like to tweak this particular scoring rubric. So there's my contact information. Please don't hesitate to call me, email me if you have any questions, and I'll try to answer your questions to the best of my abilities. So.
Thanks, June. We had another question come in.
Oh, perfect.
And it says, if there's no federal funding, sorry, hold on, my little text box is hard to read. Okay, if there's no federal funding, so only state, does the affidavit need to be included as well as the small business plan?
So the scoring in of itself is sort of detached from the DBE program or any sort of federal requirements that we may have on any contracts and that are federally assisted. And so when it comes to the plan itself, the form, obviously if it's a solely state funded contract, there's not going to be a DBE goal on that particular contract. So you're not going to be required to make any commitments and put those down in those forms. The inclusion, so I've seen people still include the forms to kind of demonstrate how or what small businesses they're looking to integrate as a part of their team to try to satisfy those categories where we take into account small business participation and give points for small business participation. But it's not a requirement because certainly you can include that as a part of your narrative just related to kind of the small business civil rights 10 points. You can say, here are the firms that I plan on using. You don't have to necessarily use the forms for that. But so it's not a requirement on state funded contracts. Short answer.